While the vast majority of actors want to be as visible as humanly possible in the movies they star in, and I mean, understandable, right? Sometimes performers also want to immerse themselves so completely in a character that the audience isn't even aware of who's playing the part underneath. Whether through using state-of-the-art makeup, the most basic yet effective props, or ingeniously hiding themselves in plain sight, these actors were all concealed beyond any recognition in these movies, actively embracing the art of disguise to ensure that only the most attentive viewers noticed who they actually were. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are actors who made sure they weren't seen in movies. Billy Bob Thornton, U-Turn. For his role in Oliver Stone's 1997 neo-noir U-Turn, Billy Bob Thornton didn't spend hours in the makeup chair to drastically transform himself, but rather covered his face in grease and motor oil, wore a backwards baseball cap, cool, nice touch, threw on some specs, and had his teeth painted brown. Even with Thornton's southern drawl being as distinctive as it is, you'd be hard-pressed to instantly recognize him as the seedy mechanic Daryl, whose interactions with Sean Penn's protagonist Bobby Cooper are one of the movie's easy highlights. To further disappear into the role, Thornton additionally gained 50 pounds of weight to give Daryl an extra heft, ensuring his gut constantly billowed out below his dirty vest. In an interview ahead of the film's release, Thornton also stated that he chose to speak without letting his lips touch, which suddenly altered his speaking pattern and made his teeth even more prominent. Adding all these affectations up, and it's incredibly easy for the audience to totally divorce the mechanic from Thornton in their mind. On a fun but somewhat incidental note, Thornton is also completely unrecognizable in Tombstone to me. Like, that's just not him. I don't believe you.
Andy Serkis, Longshot. You'd be forgiven for not even realizing that Andy Serkis had a small cameo appearance in the Seth Rogen starring rom-com Longshot, playing the ethically dubious at best media mogul Parker Wembley. When Serkis was offered the part, he was originally supposed to play it as himself without makeup, but Serkis insisted that he undergo an extensive transformation in the makeup chair in order to get into character. Hilariously, Rogen himself said that there were even occasions where the film's shooting schedule would get switched around, and so Serkis would spend huge chunks of his day getting makeup applied, well, for absolutely nothing. The end result certainly helped accentuate the sliminess of Serkis' character while distracting the audience from the fact that they're actually looking at Andy Serkis at all.
Simon Pegg, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. You might not know the name Unkar Plutt, but even casual Star Wars fans will likely remember the stern, hatchet-faced junk dealer who Rey, Daisy Ridley, deals with on Jakku in The Force Awakens. If nothing else, Plutt's gravelly, deep-voiced utterance of 1/4 portion is surely burned into our collective psyches. Plutt was in fact played by Simon Pegg, a longtime friend to director J.J. Abrams, who of course collaborated with the actor on the rebooted Kelvin Star Trek films. But the production of The Force Awakens ensured you'd never guess the character was being played by Pegg, because he was concealed under 2 layers of makeup for good measure, one practical and one digital. To bring Plutt to life, Pegg wore a bulky suit complete with a prosthetic mask, and to make sure Pegg's eyes and mouth weren't recognizable, they were replaced digitally in post-production. CGI was also used to make Plutt's face look even more menacing, far from Pegg's own approachable countenance. The Force Awakens was certainly packed with smartly concealed cameos, but while you had a faint chance of noticing Daniel Craig's voice as the stormtrooper mind-tricked by Rey late on in the movie, there were basically no obvious tells as to who Plutt really was.
Jim Carrey, The Bad Batch. In this dystopian thriller, The Bad Batch, Jim Carrey makes a most unexpected cameo appearance as a wasteland-drifting mute man known only as the Hermit. Even when Carrey removes his cardboard sunglasses, the legendary funny man is virtually unrecognizable, caked in dirt and with a long wig of hair and flowing grey beard. Carrey wanted his presence in the film to be a surprise for audiences, enough so that he insisted that neither his name nor likeness could be used prominently in the marketing campaign. When she went to meet Carrey to discuss the part, he'd already gotten to work embodying the physicality of the Hermit. He had this full beard like the character, and I had goosebumps, she said. Given that Carrey was the film's most famous cast member, edging out Keanu Reeves just slightly, one can only assume that the studio really wished that they could have promoted the film with his name and face. But alas, that was not the case.
John Leguizamo, Spawn. Say what you will about Spawn, sure it's not a particularly good movie, but it does boast one of the most legitimately impressive and radical makeup transformations in the history of the superhero genre. The part of the clown-like demon Violator is played by an absolutely unrecognizable John Leguizamo, sealed under some truly intense makeup work which in the early stages of the shoot took up to 8 hours to apply each day. That's a lot of sitting. Between the fat suit, face paint, coloured contact lenses, false teeth, and Leguizamo's own devilishly outlandish performance, it is a feat of pure chameleonism, with many surely not having any idea that it was him under the role. Ultimately, the makeup process left Leguizamo with blisters and calluses on his face and neck, and because the suit had no cooling system, he was able to wring the sweat out of it after a hard day's shooting. Ugh. Anyway, it's fairly obvious that the man suffered for his art, and while Spawn itself is a rough movie, Leguizamo's performance as the Violator comes out totally unscathed and very sweaty.
Cate Blanchett, Hot Fuzz. Believe it or not, Cate Blanchett makes a sneaky cameo appearance in Edgar Wright's Hot Fuzz, playing protagonist Nicholas Angel's ex-girlfriend Janine. Because Janine is a CSI, Blanchett's distinctive face and flowing hair are concealed underneath a sterile white costume and mask, making it incredibly difficult for viewers to even notice her, despite being given a very big close-up. In an interview, Wright explained that he envisioned the cameo as a gag about movie studios begging him to put more famous international actors in his films in exchange for a bigger budget. Blanchett, for her part, thought it was a hilarious idea and agreed to appear suited and masked up.
Bill Murray, Dumb and Dumber 2. But you know what might be the easiest way for an actor to not be recognized in a movie? Just straight up cover their face with something. Like anything. Just stick it on there. Bill Murray makes a cameo appearance in Dumb and Dumber 2 as Harry's roommate Ice Pick, who makes crystal meth in their apartment and is never seen outside of his distinctive yellow hazmat suit. More to the point, Ice Pick's face is covered at all times by a gas mask, and even when he speaks his 2 brief slivers of dialogue, the mask muffles enough of his voice that it's not easily recognizable as Murray. With Murray being a longtime collaborator of the Reilly brothers, it's fair to assume he played the part as a favor to his pals, with Peter Reilly later explaining that they thought it would be hilarious to bring in an A-lister to play a role where you can't even see their face.
Tom Cruise, Tropic Thunder. Tom Cruise was originally supposed to appear in Tropic Thunder as Rick Peck, the agent of actor Tug Speedman, who was ultimately played by Matthew McConaughey. Cruise instead suggested to the co-writer-director Ben Stiller that a studio head character be added to the script for him to play, resulting in the two creating producer Les Grossman, who is loosely modeled on famously abusive Hollywood bigwig Scott Rudin. In helping to create Grossman, Cruise enthusiastically agreed to disappear into the character through extensive makeup work, including wearing a fat suit, bold cap, and large prosthetic hands, the latter weirdly being his own idea. Though Cruise's presence in the film is well known today, hell, he even received a Best Supporting Actor Golden Globe nomination. Back in 2008, it was a massive secret that Paramount was desperate to keep under wraps. For any audience member who hadn't caught wind of Cruise's presence beforehand, his role in the film was truly uncanny, because you'd recognize that face from somewhere, but where?
Gary Oldman, Hannibal. Oh yeah, now we're talking. Gary Oldman clearly relishes disappearing into his characters more than just about any other actor out there not called Doug Jones, and in the case of Hannibal's Mason Verger, he made doubly sure that would be the case. First and foremost, to play Verger, a surviving victim of Hannibal Lecter with severe facial deformities, Oldman was rendered totally unrecognizable, with all of his most prominent facial features concealed under extensive prosthetics. Furthermore, Verger's injuries extended to having no lips or eyelids and having substantial scarring to his face, and additionally, unlike Oldman, also having a head of wispy grey hair. This required Oldman to spend 5 hours in the makeup chair per day of shooting, which, while not quite Violator levels of sweaty butt seat time, the end result is sublime. With Oldman's entire facial structure changed, Verger bears no physical resemblance to the actor in any way whatsoever. And secondly, due to a billing dispute with the studio, Oldman requested that he be uncredited for his performance. Though Oldman's credit was ultimately restored for the home video release, anyone who saw Hannibal theatrically had basically zero chance of figuring out who was underneath all of that makeup. That movie, by the way, pretty underrated. People doubt Ridley Scott way more than they should do.
Billy Crystal, The Princess Bride. Billy Crystal may appear in The Princess Bride for just a matter of minutes as the motor-mouth folk healer Miracle Max, but he sure is tough to forget, even with the funny man being layered underneath a ton of makeup and prosthetics. During pre-production, Crystal was given the floor to help design Max's look, being paired with legendary Oscar-nominated makeup artist Peter Montagna to hammer out the concrete design of the character, and Crystal truly went the extra mile to ensure that he transformed himself beyond recognition, bringing in reference photos of both baseball manager Casey Stengel and even his own grandmother for the makeup artist to study. The end result clearly speaks for itself. Crystal's appearance was drastically altered into a weathered, haggard old coot quite unlike himself, and it was absolute perfection.
Donald Sutherland. Basically every movie. Okay, so obviously Donald Sutherland is obviously Donald Sutherland in every movie that he's in, but hold on a second, I can explain. In a 2020 interview with Collider, Gillian Anderson said that Donald Sutherland confessed to her that he has a most peculiar, yet quite ingenious, stipulation built into his movie contracts. Said stipulation dictates that the scenes he shoots in the first 2 weeks of production are only ever from the middle of the script. Sutherland rationalized that the early days of a film shoot are when an actor finds their character, and so it's much better to have those scenes be the less impactful ones in the middle of the film. As such, by the time he shoots his scenes from the beginning and end of the movie, he's truly found the character and is able to make a stronger opening and closing impression. In Anderson's own words, he said, "Because if the audience believes you for the first period of time, you cannot necessarily be all there in the middle and they'll buy it because you've gained their trust in the first third of the film." By doing this, Sutherland basically ensures the integrity of his performances. By having the more awkward feeling out period of discovering his character happening in the middle third of the movie, we're all far less likely to notice any growing pains or actorly machinations from him at the start. Considering that he's been an S-tier talent for over like 50 years at this point, it's tough to fault his method.
Matt Damon, Deadpool 2. Matt Damon may well be the king of surprise cameos, but the overwhelming majority of his cameos in movies are at least pretty easy to spot because he rarely transforms his face or body drastically. Well, with the exception of Deadpool 2, that is. Damon appears in a 2-minute cameo as one of two rednecks pontificating about toilet paper, but Damon spent 3 hours in the makeup chair to have facial prosthetics applied that changed the shape and features of his face, and also donned a form-expanding fatsuit that gave him quite the beer belly. In order to keep the cameo a secret though, the production team arranged to have Damon's name kept off all of the call sheets and told no crew members beyond those who absolutely positively needed to know. Instead, Damon was referred to only by Dickie Greenleaf, both on the call sheets and in the movie's end credits, which is in reference to Jude Law's character of the same name from Damon's 1999 film The Talented Mr. Ripley. Locking the set down tight is the smartest way to keep a cameo appearance under wraps until release, and piling the actor under heaps of body-altering makeup sure didn't hurt either.
Glenn Close, Hook. The easiest way for an actor to make sure they aren't seen is to show up in a context that nobody would ever expect. And even accepting that Steven Spielberg's Hook is a film most people under the age of 40 first saw when they were relatively young, Glenn Close concealed herself in plain sight by just wearing a glue-on beard and playing a dude. Close appears briefly in the film as one of Captain Hook's pirates, Gutless, who, upon betting against Hook's ability to triumph over Peter Pan, gets put in the boo box, a sealed chest that's then filled with scorpions. Even with Close's piercing eyes being totally unchanged, we simply don't expect to see her playing such a part, and so completely discount the possibility that this could even be her in the first place. But underneath that large beard and wig, one of our greatest actresses is secretly collaborating with one of our finest ever filmmakers, and sadly, it's been their only pairing to date.
Deborah Winger, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. No matter how many times you've seen Steven Spielberg's E.T., did you note that it features a blink and you'll miss it cameo from an extremely striking 3-time Oscar-nominated actress? 2 years after she broke into Hollywood with her acclaimed Golden Globe-nominated performance in Urban Cowboy, Deborah Winger was persuaded to appear in E.T. as a favor to her good friend Spielberg. Though E.T.'s signature raspy voice was attributed to Pat Walsh, it was ultimately composited with 16 other voices, including Winger, who lent her vocals to the character. character, but she also had a second, equally unknown part in the film, playing a zombie nurse holding a dog during the iconic Halloween sequence. She can be seen shuffling past E.T. for just a matter of seconds, and per the wig and zombie makeup, she's totally impossible to notice. As karmic payback for agreeing to appear in what would become one of the highest grossing films ever made, within 2 years of E.T.'s release, she had back-to-back Best Actress Oscar nominations to her name for her performances in An Officer and a Gentleman and Terms of Endearment. Nice.
Tim Curry, legend. Much like Gary Oldman, Tim Curry is clearly an actor who takes huge delight in being unrecognizable, and though his Pennywise the Dancing Clown from It is terrifyingly transformative, it doesn't quite match his mesmerizingly invisible turn as the blood-red Lord of Darkness in Ridley Scott's Legend. Curry's makeup took 5.5 hours per day to apply, which, yes, not quite Leguizamo levels in Spawn, but considering how extensive it was, encompassing full-body prosthetics to entirely transform Curry's physique and base, it was absolutely time well spent. Even with Curry's eyes and lips being as distinctive as they are, they're surrounded by so much FX wizardry, including 2 gigantic fiberglass horns attached to his headpiece, that Curry's profile basically fizzles away. Combined with Curry's pitched-down voice, all that's left is a deeply unsettling, otherworldly portrayal of the visual embodiment of evil. As larger-than-life as Tim Curry may be, here the makeup was so extra that he didn't even register.
Keanu Reeves, Freaked. 1993 cult comedy Freaked was co-written and directed by Bill and Ted star Alex Winter and featured a truly insane supporting appearance from his Bill and Ted co-star Keanu Reeves as Ortiz the Dog Boy. Reeves appears in the film under layers and layers of furry makeup to the point that unless you really know Reeves' voice, this one is incredibly easy to miss. Reeves took things further though by also going uncredited for the part despite the obvious time and effort it took. Furthermore, due to Reeves' schedule being tight with other projects, he was replaced in some scenes by a stand-in that also might be quite familiar. It's Johnny Knoxville of Jackass fame. Seriously, check out Freaked if you haven't already. It's totally worth it for the deranged practical makeup and special effects alone.
John C. Reilly, Tenacious D in The Pick of Destiny. While you probably guessed that Dave Grohl played Satan in Tenacious D in The Pick of Destiny, after all, he did the same thing in the music video for Tenacious D's song Tribute, think about if you figured out who plays the Sasquatch that Jables meets during his mushroom trip. After eating the shrooms, Jables stumbles across Sasquatch in the forest, evidently an actor in a large suit with their face painted brown and wearing vampire-like fangs. Complete with the creature's mumbly, atonal voice, it's incredibly difficult to get a bead on who is playing the part, but as it turns out, it is in fact the great John C. Reilly. Although Jack Black is still absolutely recognizable, even when he imagines himself being transformed into the Sasquatch's son, complete with all the aforementioned makeup, Reilly's less distinctive facial features allow him to totally disappear into this madcap role.
Tilda Swinton, Trainwreck. Tilda Swinton is one of cinema's greatest chameleons, and it seems that she's infinitely more likely to accept a part in a movie if it means that she's able to drastically transform herself. Swinton is virtually unrecognizable in the Judd Apatow-directed Amy Schumer starring 2015 comedy Trainwreck, where she plays protagonist Amy's high-strung magazine editor boss, Diana. Swinton was given creative control by both Apatow and Schumer over the character's look, and so decided to utterly swing for the fences, with her final appearance based on former Vogue Paris editor Karine Roitfeld. With her deeply tanned skin, long blonde hair, and masses of eye makeup, Swinton is basically the polar opposite of her regular pale, somewhat androgynous self, and in conjunction with her London accent is insanely convincing as an icy, conventionally stylish businesswoman. If you somehow realize that this was Swinton despite her best efforts to dissuade you, well done.
Christopher Meloni, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle remains one of the greatest stoner comedies of all time, and among its more memorably unhinged asides is the outrageous subplot where Harold and Kumar are picked up by Freak Show, a haggard tow-truck driver with boils all over his face. You'd certainly be forgiven for having no idea the role was played by internet darling and Law & Order SVU star Christopher Meloni, who donned significant facial prosthetics along with a long, scraggly wig to disappear into the deranged character. As transformative as the makeup is, you have to give Meloni credit for digging deep and immersing himself in the walking cartoon of a character, enough that you'd never ever suspect it was that guy from Oz and Law & Order.
David Hyde Pierce, Hellboy. Now this is an interesting one, because technically speaking, David Hyde Pierce was never actually meant to be seen in Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy anyway, given that he was hired to provide only the distinctive voice for Fishman's superhero Abe Sapien, who was played on set by the legendary actor-contortionist Doug Jones. Effectively, the studio lobbied for Pierce to voice Abe Sapien in order to inject some added star power into the fledgling superhero film. After all, given that Pierce's hit sitcom Frasier ended the very same year that Hellboy came out, his media profile was extremely high at the time. However, Pierce ultimately had other ideas, as when he came to record his voiceover role, he heard Jones's placeholder voice and wondered why he'd even been hired for the part when all of Jones's own performances were so perfect. As a result, Pierce decided to provide the voice uncredited, feeling that Jones should receive sole credit for Abe due to how thoroughly he embodied the character. And so while the Frasier star wasn't ever meant to be seen in the main content of the film, now not even his name flashes up during the movie's credits, so he literally wasn't seen in any way, shape, or form. Between this and the fact that Pierce didn't attend the premiere nor promote the film out of respect to Doug Jones, that was his own words, it's fair to say that the plan to use Pierce's A-lister clout to sell the film backfired spectacularly. Whether coincidentally or not, Hellboy was a box office disappointment, though when Hellboy 2: The Golden Army eventually came to fruition a few years later, Jones was finally allowed to voice Abe himself. Nice.